Hello, pleased to meet you. My name is Hans. Yes, Hans. You know that nondescript figure in a grey suit that occupies your mind for a full nanosecond on the subway or on the street corner, as we all bustle and crowd our way to earn a salary. I guess in Japan I would be called a salary man, which is what they call the millions of grey-clad worker ants who toil in the huge breathing body of Tokyo. Anyway, once again, my name is Hans, an extremely ordinary German man with narrow features, and if you look carefully, a shade of a haunting him are spectacled eyes. I have a sister called Greta, or at least, I had a sister called Greta before she was missed off to Monaco by a man wearing an Armani suit and driving a Ferrari. She now lives amongst the casinos and palaces, and no doubt thinks of me from time to time while busy rattling her jewellery. Yet every year on a certain day she phones me, a special phone call, not a catch-up phone call, not a gossip phone call, and definitely not a boring got-a-phone brother phone call, as I haven't spoken or thought about him for a while now. No, it is a comfort call. A call that brings back a night many years ago. A night that wraps itself around us still. And once again, we are scared little kids. Kids who one dark moonlit night were confronted by something ancient, active, and indescribably evil. So after so many years of my brain mind painting a picture of horror, it is time to put it down, get rid of it, and walk away. It will always be there, but it needs to be exercised as an image that brings no pleasure, only a dark, trickling, black rain. Greta and I were raised on a farm, deep in the beautiful Bavarian countryside, surrounded by forests and mountains towering, imperious and mighty, gazing down on streams gurgling with delight. Our parents resembled those far-off mountains, solid, dependable, and full of love. Farming life is hard with loads of chores, but Greta and I work with a sense of scope and breadth that only kids who are raised in the open country can feel. Every night after a day on the farm, we would make sure the other members of our farm were happy. The goats, the sheep and the cows, they were happy and productive. Then we would have our supper, then sit on the porch overlooking our small little kingdom, watching the sun hand the stage over to the moon and its supporting cast of stars. Father would tell a story, sometimes dark tales of the north, with dark forests, deep gorges with mountains like decaying teeth, though most times it was just German folk tales, nursery rhymes, that brought a smile and a laugh from two enraptured, enthralled kids. Germany was at war, we knew that. A far-off war, all started by a strange little man who looked like an accountant in some back office, somewhere himself hidden by the grey walls of a backstreet bank. Yet, his words vibrated with an awesome, hypnotic power, his body possessed by something other than human, and his eyes burned with a cold power that was devoid of any humanity. We occasionally heard planes flying overhead and sometimes a far-off rumble, but otherwise the sun drew water every day, our animals chewed contentedly, and our lives ticked over comfortably. The war was distant. It was not part of us. All that changed, however, one bright morning. Greta and I were in the bedroom upstairs. Mum and Dad were doing some late afternoon gardening, when suddenly we all stopped and stared down the narrow dirt road that feeds our farm as an ominous growl sauntered through the air. Suddenly, like a sleek black shark, a huge limousine, flanked by another smaller car and then 2 motorbikes, ate up our driveway and swam to a stop in front of my suddenly very scared and pale parents. Like a cadaver's jaw falling open, the car door swung out, and an apparition stepped out. He walked slowly towards us. His eyes were the darkest black, with a jawline resembling an open blade, and with about as much expression as an oil slick. He surveyed my now scared father like a new and interesting insect. He started talking. I don't know now what he said, but after what seemed like an age, he stopped. He drilled 2 holes in my father's heart with his eyes and suddenly looked up, straight into the eyes of 2 scared kids at the window. The face cracked a smile, and a thin scarecrow wave from a gloved hand froze our blood. Suddenly he spun around and disappeared, back into the sleek black shark that burst into a low growl, reversed slowly, and with a crunch of tires turned around. The 2 outriders on their motorbikes, like fish following a whale, simultaneously gunned their motorbikes, and with a swirl of dust and crunching tires, the shark, with his 2 minions, cruised back down the road looking for something to murder. Dad was silent. Mother was in tears and holding us in their arms. They told us something strange. Right on that farthest border of our farm, deep inside a dark forest, there was an old, unused railway track coming from somewhere, going nowhere. Apparently an old supply route. Anyway, we were warned never to go down there, as from now it was verboten, out of bounds, and the penalties would be severe. So life carried on. The war grumbled in the distance, and life on the farm ticked over in the usual farmer time. Then one night things changed. Greta and I were lying in our beds, unable to sleep. It was late, moonlight heavy with that bated breath atmosphere of deep dark night. Suddenly we heard a sound, the sound of a train. A new sound, but a sound that sounded like old bones being rattled together as it increased in volume, though still far away as it swelled to compete with the crickets. Then, like a dying breath, it faded away into the night. We were disturbed. There was something about that sound. No whistles, no hooting or steam. Just a strange, clacking metallic sound like an executioner sharpening his blade. This happened a few times a week, and each time it was the same. The far-off, slowly increasing, then slowly decreasing sound of a dead train coming from somewhere, going nowhere. I asked Dad about it one day, but he just turned pale and made me swear never to go down there. It was about this time the dream started. In it, I saw a huge chimney against the night sky, roaring and belching flames and smoke. An orange glow, a long line of people, shuffling in the dark, holding each other. Moonlight bathed this awful scene. Suddenly the black scarecrow figure of the man in the car danced in front of me like a uniformed, demented marionette, cackling and holding a tin, shaking it in my face. He opened the lid, and inside I saw a pile of bones writhing around like worms, while behind him the procession of people carried on into an open doorway, into the black doorway and not coming out, coming from somewhere, going nowhere. As the smoke belched and the flames roared into the night sky. With a yelp I awoke. Greta was shaking me, and the moon gazed through the window. Shaking, I cried and held her tightly. Now this happened almost every night, and we both knew it was something to do with that new sound. That sound emanating from the forest late at night. The sound of rattling bones. So against all our instincts, our fears, and parental wrath, we decided to investigate. Silence. The crickets had started their symphony hours ago. Mum and Dad were fast asleep in the hallway. Greta and I, by the open window, silence. Slowly we eased ourselves onto the ledge outside and dropped soundlessly into the grass below. We froze as one of our sheep seeing us gave a plaintive little bleat, but still the night bore down with silence. Holding hands, we set off. We planned to be on the railway line a few minutes before that awful sound began again, which was about midnight. The forest was a dark cathedral with owls calling in the background. Then after what seemed like an age, we arrived. The railway line glistened like a silvery snake in the moonlight, and suddenly a light breeze made the leaves whisper to each other in a hastened conversation. Then we heard it, bones clacking against each other in the distance, as suddenly the silvery tracks started to hum. Then we saw it, a flash through the trees in the distance, coming closer, ever closer, fearful yet breathless with anticipation. I grabbed Greta and we stepped back, away from the tracks. The sun was now a scream as with a rush of an avalanche. The huge steel monster bore down on us. The change was terrific. Where there was just once trees, peace and moonlight. Was now filled with a huge cathedral sound coupled with screams of steam and screaming whales. With a blast of monolithic steel, the engine roared past us, to be replaced by the comparative whisper of the carriages, and that's when we saw the faces. I knew that the eyes were the windows of the soul, and that our face gets to reflect the universe. But what we saw was a vision of hell. Hundreds of faces peering out from glaring windows, hopeless, terrified, staring at an outside world that was no longer theirs, and soon to be snatched away. At once, the dream came back. I saw those cattle trucks once again full of faces, and that belching chimney. A dancing cadaver. And I knew with a leaden certainty that sank like a dose of mercury down my soul. With a scream of knowledge and terror I ran through the trees, away from those pale, despairing faces, away from this new reality. Away from that screeching sound of steel and stolen lives, away, out of breath. And in view of our farmhouse in the distance, I stopped, and I was surprised to see Greta next to me, as out of shape as I was and just as terrified. We hugged each other with the sound of hell receded into the distance. We sneaked back into the garden and climbed softly back into our bedroom, accompanied by the soft snores of our sleeping parents. We sat staring at the moonlight, whose face did not look so innocent anymore. The cricket symphony was now rather muted, and somewhere in my mind they had changed to a minor key. I do not know the details about what was happening, but I guess in our childlike innocence, I was informed in the universe, albeit in a very careful way, about what the situation was, and I guess that the magnitude of the crime was so great that even children in innocence was exempt from the knowledge of its existence. We never spoke of that night again. As we sat in the moonlight listening to the crickets, we made a pact that this would be shared between us and us only. The war came and went. We saw strange men in foreign uniforms trudging up the road, and often they stopped for a drink of water and a chat with our parents. They spoke of their homes in America, of faraway lands and huge mountains. Then on the radio it was all over. Mum and Dad danced for joy, and I got the feeling of a global upwelling of relief and happiness. Eventually I went to Berlin and helped with the restoration of our country. Greta did the same, and our lives carry on. Anyway, that's just me, Hans, a grey businessman on the street or in a subway in New York, or from Berlin, coming from somewhere, going nowhere, with his own life and story to tell. But with a secret, a burden, if you will, of a cold moonlit light many years ago when innocence and reality collided, when evil was comprehended by a mind too small to actually process it, and a warning that is too profound ever to be ignored again.